live 2:30 on Monday. It's kind of my new time slot that I'm working in, Scott, for it to be my live, kind of what I would call my showtime. Is what we're working on here. But today's guest is Scott Maderer. Knows exactly what it's like to hit rock bottom, buried in debt, on the brink of divorce, and question his purpose. Now he helps Christian men and couples realign their time, talent, and treasures so they can live out their true calling with clarity and confidence. I feel like we just created four T's for you there. I was working with someone on the four F's of life, that family, fitness, finance, that you hear a lot of folks talk about. But I just reading that time, talent, treasures, so they can live out their true calling. I think
Yeah.
we just landed on something new. Scott, thank you for being here, man. I was reading about you, excited to learn more about you, and your journey and what you're working on now, and kind of what all got you to that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, Jeff.
Yeah, tell me right now, like, what's a day in your life look like these days?
Well, I work for myself and I work from home. I'm a small business owner, but I work with folks literally all over the world. So because of that, usually I'm getting up. I actually get up about 5:30 in the morning and call my adopted daughter and make sure she's up and moving to work because that's just something that I like to talk to her in the morning. And then I talk to my son and you know usually a little later in the morning because he doesn't get up quite as early as she does and make sure he's doing okay, do my morning routine, spend some time with some spiritual time, spend some time drinking a cup of coffee, get to feed the chickens, all the fun stuff in the morning, and do a little walk and exercise. And then I usually crank it up about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, sometimes I'll have a call with a client. Sometimes it's recording a podcast episode. I have my own podcast that I'm doing. Sometimes it's working on something else in the business or meeting with a referral partner or doing some research for something with a client situation, whatever it is, doing that. And then I also, at least part of the year, I work training other coaches through an organization called Coach Connections. And so sometimes it's getting content for them together or redoing work for them or creating an assessment or doing something else to get ready for the teaching I do. And then, of course, I spend time. I've got a group of men that I meet with once a week. So, again, if it's one of those days, I'm going and meeting with them. Other than that, again, some days going to the grocery store and all of the normal stuff. But most of my work time is functioned around, getting on a call with a client somewhere and dealing with what's going on with them, trying to figure out how to best support them in the pathway that they're on.
Man, that's too cool. And I tell you what, you sparked the dad in me. I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I wonder. I think about those days, and I'm not one to. I'm absolutely. I try to value every second now as I've gotten older. Um, I tell people a lot of times, Scott, I spent a lot of years trying to see how many years I could shave off my life, and now I work as hard as I can to see how many seconds I can add back. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to hear you say that that's part of your routine is calling and checking in, and still I don't know how old your children or your daughter, stepdaughter, or adopted daughter, and your son is, but still, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, my daughter's in her 40s and my son is 22. The young lady that I call my adopted daughter, she has two girls that she's taken adopted herself, and so we're kind of the where that's where we're in her life and in their life and all of that. She's been somebody. She's actually a former student of mine, but then became connected to our family, and we kind of have have been with her and in her life most of her life. And then, of course, my son is 22. He's up in Dallas, so he's about 3 hours away. She's down in San Antonio, so she's about 3 hours the other direction.
Yeah, other direction. Yeah, gonna be hot either which way you go right now, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I made a point. I mean, I'm on purpose. Is With my father and my background and my history, I had a father who was an alcoholic, and he wasn't the most loving of guys. He didn't really show my sister, myself, or my mother a lot of love in a lot of different ways. And I one of the commitments I made whenever I had a son is he's going to hear "I love you" from me every single day. And I think I've probably managed to keep that commitment so far. I maybe have missed a day in there somewhere when I was sick or something, but I've done the darndest I could to make sure that whether it's a text, whether it's a voicemail, whether it's a picking up the phone and call, but he's going to see those words, from me every single day, because I wanted to make sure that he didn't have the same memory if I did, as I can remember the one time my father said that to me, and I'm like, nope, he's gonna be like, when hasn't he said it to me?
Yeah.
you know.
Scott, I don't know my dad. I never met him. And I tell people a lot of times, I grew up with an alcoholic grandfather, or that person was. And I say alcoholic. He was reckless. He had a lot of destructive behaviors behind alcohol, right? I
Yeah,
think I
so did
think
my
it's
dad.
probably the common. I think it's the I don't think we could truly say it was more so alcoholism. I think it was just the destructive habits that came with drinking, right? And
Addictive behavior is
yeah,
is the
there you
actual
go.
root
Yeah,
problem, but yeah, in this case it showed up in alcohol, drugs, and other things. So yeah.
and what I've learned in conversations with just amazing folks like yourself is, I also know that they were dealing with their own survival
Oh,
mentality and
absolutely.
their own things, right? And I thought that all that was just being pushed on me. And so what I wanted to tell you, what you just said there was, me and my son, almost daily is something we'll be working on something, or we're kind of I'm advising, or he and I are trying to figure out. And I go, listen, what we're figuring out here is for mining, is for your offspring. I'm just, dude, you're teaching me, and me and you are figuring out. I said, what you and I develop, you're going to pass on to your kids,
Mhm.
and all the things. And I said, this is, you and I are starting this today, or during
Mhm.
our lifetime, or a little life cycle together. So exactly what you just said, man. I'm real big on that. I told him, like, whatever, well, all the little negative things that have made me into give me the amazing life I have. All those little negative things that I've learned were just part of my path and my plan, and all those,
Right.
all those little nuggets. I was like, you don't have to deal with those.
Right.
And through my mom's journey, and her mom's journey, and on to me, I was like, it all that now we can build based off of stability. One of the things that my mom, she's dated, been a boyfriend, same guy for 50 years now. They never got married, but the commonality between my mom, him, and me is we never really knew our dads.
Mhm.
So my son, I was like, that stop. You and your sister both know who dad is, and we're going to build this foundation that you two will be able to go out and use, for just generations of us to come. You guys are first. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me.
Well, and I think it's again, it's a both and thing. And what I mean by that is the way we grow up, without a doubt, it programs things about us and how we think about parenting and how we think about our relationships, how we think about money, how we think about time, how we think about career. All of those things kind of get programmed into us at a level because of what we're exposed to when we grow up. At the same time, we're all also conscious beings. We have free will. We have the ability to learn. We have the ability to change. We have the ability to adapt. We have the ability to get new programming, new software. And so it's kind of that both end of how do we acknowledge the things that we had, and like you, I don't have any regrets about how I grew up or the experiences I have. I don't look back at them. The word I would use, I've actually been asked that, what regrets do you have in your life? And I'm like, I don't have any. And they're like, well, everyone has regrets. I'm like, no, I have experiences that I look back on and wish, yeah, kind of, that was stupid. I wish I wouldn't have done that. Or, yeah, I learned something from that one. Don't do that again. But they're not regrets, because at the same time I kind of like who I am today. And for the most part, most days I kind of look at my life and go, yeah, it's not perfect, but this is a good life. This is
Yeah.
where I want to be. I'm a good person. I've learned good things. And if I change those experiences, would I be who I am today? So it is both of us taking an active position and acknowledging, like you said, my dad had some terrible experiences growing up himself. He had other things, that he had demons of his own. and I have to acknowledge those, but I still can love him and love, and there's good lessons I learned from him too. You know, he was an entrepreneur, he was a small business owner, he was one of the hardest working men I've ever met in my life, you know. So he had all these good things too. And it's up to me to pick and choose and go, okay, so I want to learn from the good things and take those in as something I do. And I want to learn from the bad things, but take those in as something that I don't do, you know. And you filter it, but that's hard because it's a lot of times a lot of those habits and behaviors are programmed in a way that we don't even realize that they're programmed in there unless you do the hard work of consciously working to figure it out and go, hey, is this serving me well? Great, keep it. If it's not serving me well, okay, what are we going to do to get rid of it then?
Finding the right voice who says the right words in the
Yep.
right manner at the right time. I am 100%. I've had friends before be like, "Man, we've been trying to tell you." And I'm like, "I,
Yep,
I
I
didn't
didn't
hear
hear
you.
you.
Yeah, I didn't hear you." Or there's been some cases where I was like, "Well, I heard you. I just didn't want to listen." Um, I've been there too. I'm with you on that. I got some do overs. I wouldn't change it, but I would be like, I probably could have handled that different.
Yeah, yeah.
I was kind of mentoring one of my kids I coach in baseball. I'd take him to the gym, and we were riding home, and he said he framed something in a kind of a negative mindset about. He goes, I'm a slow base runner, but I'm a really fast long distance runner. And I was like, no, 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 you're working and developing your base running. You're not slow. You're not. Don't approach it as a negative. You work every day to get better at that. And I was teaching him how to reframe words to just
Mhm.
approach it. He was like, okay, all right. And I was like, repeat it to me. And he's 13 years old, so it's easy. It's an easy conversation for me to have. But just how you approach things and the words that kind of come in of
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
with you on that.
there's words that I've worked hard to get them out of my vocabulary. I tell my clients the same thing. You're there literally are a couple of things that I'll look at them and go, no, you're not allowed to say that. Change what you just said. That's that's not coming out of your mouth. I've taught and I'll give you an example. One of them is I don't have time for that, and there's something I'll teach you to say instead. And the other one is I had to do it, and because that one shows up a lot with money, shows up with time too, but more often with money, where oh, I had to buy a new car, or I had to get this or spend money on that. It's like, no, 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 you didn't have to, you chose to. Might have been a good choice, might have been a bad choice, I don't know. Choice is choice, but you got a
And
choice. you know
I I ended up getting in trouble one time, and just told my mom here recently. We were joking about it, and we was all on the phone there, and I was like, "Listen, when I walked out the back door that night, I said I could have got in the car and went to church. But I chose to do what I did. I said, so don't, the outcome it was what it was. I said, but don't, I can't live in this woe is me world. I made
no,
a choice,
you
and I
choose.
was just, yeah, deal with it.
And I tell people, even the most extreme situation, there are things that if you, Jeff, if you had broken into my house and you're standing there with a gun to my head, and I mean, I know that's a horrible picture, but and you said you've got to do this. There are things that you could say and put in word of this where I'd look at you and go, dude, you're just gonna have to shoot me. I'm not gonna do it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's
Well,
like, I'm not gonna do it. You're just gonna have to shoot me. There are other things that you could tell me to do, and I'd be like, all right, I'll do that. To save my life, absolutely, I'll do that. You asked for my wallet. Here's my wallet. I don't care. I can replace that. But you asked me to hurt my wife or my kid. We're going to have a different conversation,
yeah,
and one of us is probably going to get hurt, one way or the other. And that's just the way I'm wired and the way I am. But even in that extreme of a situation, I have a choice, And so I always tell people, when you say I had to, what you did is you just took away your power. You just made yourself powerless, and you're not powerless. You have the power of choice. And again, this isn't a value statement. This isn't even about making a good choice or a bad choice. It's just literally you have a choice.
yeah.
I mean, because like you said, you could have gone to church or you could go do something negative. It's not even about that part of it. The fact that you got in the car meant you had a choice to do something.
Yeah. Tell me, and this is the part I was going to tee you up for here too. and because we're right here in the middle of an amazing conversation, you didn't get this mindset from just being born and blessed.
No.
A little bit, maybe a little bit. Let me reframe that because I think it was a part of being born and blessed because you did it, but you didn't. This is not something you. Sounds like you probably took a little hard path, like
uh,
some of the best coaches do, and some of the best advice givers have lived life. Walk us back and kind of get us give us the version of to get us to where we are today.
Sure. So I've had, like you said, I've had a lot of formative experiences. You already mentioned grew up with an alcoholic father, had that kind of thing growing up. I actually, I'm going to become a medical researcher was kind of my original thought. And I did that for a little while, figured out that was actually about chasing grant money. Didn't want to chase grant money the rest of my life, became a school teacher in the midst of a teaching career, which, if anyone knows anything about teaching, you work a lot of long hours. It's actually a lot of emotional work, and you don't get paid very much. And it wasn't about the money, but what happened is I had gotten married, I got divorced, and then my current wife and I got married. And as I kind of looked up one day, we had made a series of decisions where we were about $60,000 in debt, almost $70,000 in debt, and I was making about $40,000 a year. And like a lot of men, I put a lot of meaning in being a good provider, being somebody who takes care of my wife, takes care of my family, these sorts of, and a lot of men do, and that's just something that I think we're wired to think that
Yeah.
way. And I'm looking down at the bank account and going, I'm worth more dead than I am alive. Literally, I have enough life insurance that if I die, she's going to be better off than if I'm alive. And I got in a pretty dark place where I literally was thinking about suicide. And we weren't talking because I was going to, quote, protect her from all of this stuff, and shield her from it. I wasn't telling her anything that was going on. Of course, my wife's a pretty smart lady. She knew everything that was going on, but we're not going to talk about that, because she knew, but she was also trying to protect me and not put more stress on me. And the end result, though, is that we weren't communicating and we were drifting apart and all of that, which of course made everything worse, not better. And so I used to drive home. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I'd drive home on this long, windy road. And I had this plot in my head where I'd actually go off the road and it would look like I fell asleep because I was driving home late at night. And so insurance would pay out. And I mean, I had everything planned out
You had a plan.
and was going to take my life. And for whatever reason, they changed the radio lineup. I used to listen to talk radio because that would keep me awake. I know the irony of I'm listening to something to keep me awake while I'm plotting to fall asleep, or pretend to fall asleep. Again, your brain doesn't work logically when you're in these places, but you do weird stuff. And they changed the radio lineup, and this guy came on and started talking about getting out of debt. It was Dave Ramsey out of Tennessee, and I'd never
That's
heard him
crazy.
before. And I'm yelling and screaming at this idiot on the radio, telling me stuff that, nobody could live this way. He doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. And after about 3 or 4 days on a Friday, maybe a week, they have the debt free screams on Friday. And a
Yeah.
couple came on, and this man started telling Dave their story. And it wasn't identical to my story, but there was enough things in common. He was talking about being suicidal. He was talking about the same amount of debt. He was talking about the same amount of money. He was talking about all of this, and they were talking about how they'd managed to, he was talking about almost divorce, enough boxes were checked. I can't even remember anymore. In my head, it was
Yes.
identical to mine, but the reality is I know it wasn't. But it was close enough that I'm going, wait a minute, if they did it, I sure, I got to be at least as smart as them, I gotta, right? Maybe we could do this. And one of the things he said is the first thing he had done was sit down and come clean to his wife
Yeah.
and told her what was going on, and that they decided to work together. And because of that, they were able to do all of this. And I'm like, oh crap, that wasn't what I wanted to hear. But so I went home that weekend and got my wife and said, hey, we got to go for a drive. I need to talk to you. And we lived with some family, so it was easier to get off the property to be private, and kind of went down and parked in a parking lot and told her what was going on. And at the end of that, she says, yeah, I know, you know, kind of, I've been sensing all of this. I knew most of the details, you know, I know where we're at. Told her I was listening to this radio show. She says, you meet Dave Ramsey? I'm listening to it during the day. I'm like, okay. So I didn't know she was listening to the same show. She was listening to the daytime. I was listening to the rebroadcast. And she's like, yeah, I heard the guy on Friday and, you know, kind of sounds like about where we're at. I'm like, yeah. So what do you want to do? And she's like, well, let's do this. I'm like, all right. And so basically by Monday, we had completely changed the way we were living and turned it around, started making different decisions, different choices, living a different way. And in 2 years, 11 months, we paid off $78,842.54. Not that I know it to the penny, but I know it to the penny. And by the way, you'll notice I said we had almost 70,000, but we paid off 78,000. That's because in the midst of all of this, we started it while I was a teacher. In the midst of all of it, I changed jobs. I went into a corporate career, did that for 11 years. In the midst of all of that, I had a collapsed lung twice and ended up with 2 surgeries. And that was when we didn't have good insurance. And one of the hospital visits was in December and the other one was in January.
Oh, oh,
So
oh.
for those of you that know how insurance works, it means we got to pay everything twice, you know. And we had like I don't know, $5,000, $8,000 deductible or something, you know, out of pocket maximum. Well, we ended up having to pay it twice,
Twice.
you know, and for an emergency
Scott,
surgery and all of that. So we had some bumps on the road. That's why we ended up paying off more than we actually started with.
all right, let me interrupt you real quick. So
Sure.
I want before you get too far ahead. All right, first off, do you ever tell them? Oh, all right, hang on here. What year are you talking about?
So we actually paid off the debt in January of 2000. 2003. Is that right?
That far
Yes,
back?
that's right. 2003.
All right, I had a similar.
2006. Sorry,
All right, so
2006.
I was about 2011, 12, listening to Dave in the. I was getting ready for work. Back then, I was W-2, and I was getting ready for work, and this lady come on, and uh, her husband had died and
Mm,
left them, saddled them with debt, and she had buckled down, and this, that, and the other, and like he had introduced her to Dave right when he got sick or something other, and they worked through it, and like her honor of this thing was that she was there to honor him because she had finished their thing.
journey.
And I was like, I'll never let my freaking family be that. I said, this stops today. And I remember I called my wife. It's like, all right, so I want to tell you that. I just want to see where you
Hmm.
was time wise to see. But I had a similar thing. And I think what Dave Ramsey gives us, he explained it in a manner. He reminds me of the guy I was telling you about. I work with in San Antonio, Cashflow Mike. Cashflow Mike explains business finance the way that I understand it. So
Hmm.
I'm by the book. I'm not a very smart person. I've got tons of experience, and when it comes to explaining math and accounting, I just like it goes in and it doesn't. He explained, Dave, that's what Dave, he gave me a playbook that was simple enough for me to follow that is like,
Hmm.
it's not over the top, but he gave me a playbook. All right. So I want to tell you that. I want to point that out for our audience of what that is, that it, one of the powers that he has. The other thing I wanted to ask you is when your wife got in the car, did you tell her about the original plan?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She knew. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was all part of the story, and she knew I was in a very dark place.
Yeah.
She didn't know it had gone so far as plotting the suicide, and again, you know, spoiler alert, she would not have been happier with the money instead of me, but
Yeah.
you know, that was what I was thinking at the time, but that
She
wasn't
put the
true.
belt on. She's like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, she knew I would never have done anything if she was in the car. I
yeah,
mean, it
no,
was
just,
literally me being alone that caused it to
yeah.
happen. But yeah, she
Use the word there, Scott. You felt alone.
yeah, it was, if I was alone, it would, I wouldn't have ever hurt her.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't in me. But and you know, Dave, you know, I like you, I took a lot away from hearing Dave. You know, now my coaching is evolved where I bring in a lot of tools that aren't just quote the Dave Ramsey, you know,
Yeah.
baby steps and all of
Yeah.
that. And I also think it's more fluid. I don't think everyone I don't think everyone's journey is the same, and he kind of everyone's journey is the same in the methodology. At the same time, like you, I think what he does a really good job of is putting together a system that's simple and that people can follow. And and then honestly, to be fair, as a business person, look at him. Dave Ramsey's really good at marketing,
Yeah.
and that's something you can learn from him too. But at the end of the day, the work that I do with folks is exactly what you're talking about too. It's trying to take complicated stuff and make it simple. And I think one of the biggest channels is when it comes with money, and you kind of just said it yourself. Everyone always thinks of it as a math problem. If I just understood the numbers, I'd
Yeah.
understand it. It's like, folks, it's not a math problem. It's a you problem.
Yeah.
It's not about the money. It's about behavior and mindset and
Behaviors.
belief and habit. And, that's the stuff that changes your money. The money's
Scott,
just the symptom.
you would be surprised the number of business owners that I coach that have a negative relationship with money.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
they're afraid of money. They're money
me
scared. They
too.
got scarcity mindset. They have all these things. Just a horrible relationship with money, just for things that was passed along to
Mm-hmm.
them, and they're afraid to go and
Well,
because it's
I
just
can't
how bad it
understand
is.
that. I, I
Yeah.
I can't understand. There's no way I can figure that out. So I just have to hire someone and give them all my numbers, and and they'll tell me what's going on. It's like, no, sorry, they won't.
Mm,
You've got to learn. Well, it's not that you can't hire someone to do bookkeeping and be a CPA and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, dude, nobody's going to care about your business more than you.
yeah.
And you got to at least know enough to know the story the numbers are telling you. And I'm like you. I work with a lot of small business owners, and most of them it's either avoidant behavior. I'm just going to ignore it and hope it all works out. It won't.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to it, or it won't.
Same
Or
thing at home.
it's bad habits, or it's bad habits. It's things they come in and it's scarcity mindset. It's not thinking about things from the not doing any sort of looking at where is money actually coming from, where is money actually going, and because of that, at the end of the day, they're just making decisions based on the best information they have, but the information they have isn't complete because they're not really looking at the picture. They're not really thinking about the cash flow, and to use the cash flow mic kind of thing. They're not looking at cash flow. And
Yeah.
you know that's
A
where too
lot
you
of
have folks that
Scott.
are
A lot
killed by
of
success as well as failure. you know
yes. One of the things that I have that I work on sometimes, kind of what you just said, is I got a lot of folks coming and want to start business, and they're looking, there's this misconception about business credit, and business credit kind of doesn't exist till you start in like 2 million
Yeah,
or
you
so in
you
liquid,
got to
right?
get pretty big before they start
Yeah.
giving the business
Yeah,
credit.
it ain't, you can't go out and butcher your personal credit, just for the fact this is greater good here for the audience. You can't go butcher your personal credit and then go try to
Yeah,
establish an LLC and an EIN, thinking you're going to be able to lean on that business credit. It just doesn't work like that.
yeah, they want
So
a personal guarantee most of the time.
yes. So I send people back to where you just said. I'm like, listen, man, well, we can't get here yet, but here's a plan where you can still get your business open, but we got to work. If you can't,
Dude, you don't clean up
banks
this
are,
mess.
yeah, we got to fix your and get your experience and get you comfortable with money, so the banks will look at you and say, hey, this is all the work. Like go back to previous Scott, and a bank looks at that package when you go in and say, hey, I want $100,000 to open a business, and they go, yeah, not today. They go back and look at this Scott, and they go, wait a minute, this guy was totally train wrecked upside down, but he fixed it, and
Right.
he's smart, right? That's everybody appreciates that.
Well, and the other attitude too, so like my wife and I actually don't use credit. So like
Yeah, same.
we
Yeah,
recently bought a house. When I say we bought a house, I mean we bought a house. I don't
that's
mean
awesome.
we financed a house. And and we've been blessed and gotten some gifts and other things that have helped us out along the way. So it's not all don't misunderstand. This isn't a I done it all myself and break. No, I've been
Yeah,
blessed in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's deciding what's important to you and what you want, and then actually living it out. And like you said, what happens is a lot of times the behaviors that are showing up at home, you think the business is going to solve the behaviors, and all the business does is give you another place to have the same behavior.
yeah,
And so you end up taking from you know, the people, number of people that I see two extremes. One is I get the business going, but then every time there's an emergency at home, I end up raiding the business, which, you know, slows down the business growth so that I can solve the problem at home, which then creates a business problem. So now I'm spending all this time fixing the business problem. Well, guess what? Now I have a problem at home again. And, you know, and you're in this constant loop of, you got a problem on one side of the scale or the other, and you're constantly stealing from one to fix the other.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, you know. Or the other one is the number of people I see that get up going into business. They've been working in it 2 or 3 years, and it's like, so how much are you paying yourself? They're like, oh, I haven't paid myself. And it's like, wait, you're not in a business then, dude. That's an expensive hobby. You know, let's talk about how you can actually pay yourself. And it's because they're just not paying attention and not thinking about it the right way.
I ask people a lot of times when that comes up. I have two ways I frame it. Um, would you, if you were working at a W-2,
Yep.
would you let them go pay cycles and not pay you? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well,
Oh,
why are you doing it? The other way I frame that around is I have someone who's stepping down and they're trying to take their hobby to the next level and they're trying to get their mind wrapped around what, Jeff, I know I'm not gonna pay myself for the first year, so that and the other. And I go, well, let me ask you, here's what I want you to do starting next week. Is when you get paid at your company, I said, I want you to take and just reverse that transaction and send them the money back. And I said, that's what I want you to start doing. They're like, why in the world would I do that? And I go, that's what you're planning on
same
doing in your
thing. That's what
business.
you just
Yeah.
said you're going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically what you're gonna do. I said, if it's not good for that company to do it, why would you want your company to have that practice? And it's a really it's a absolutely blunt way of trying to get someone to find that realization, because it's the I've had more people respond to that of like, holy crap, you're right, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's the
And
same thing.
yeah, they get frustrated because they were getting ready to go down this path of, so man, that's a I love having those conversations, and helping people get out of the way. Keep going. So you get Dave, did you get to do debt free? Did you do the scream? Did you do
Yeah,
all that
we
stuff?
did the
Yeah,
debt
did you
free scream
really?
in 2009. You know, so it took us 2 years, 11 months, and we did the debt free scream. Did all of that. You know, about 4 months before you can get on the show to do the debt free scream after we were actually out of debt. And then we've remained completely debt free, you know, ever since then, um, as well. So had a son during all of that. You know, he's now out of the house and working and doing all of that. And, you know, a lot of other changes. Like I said, I went into the corporate world, did that for 11 years, worked myself up into a senior position, realized in the meantime we were doing this debt stuff, and people started coming to us and going, y'all are weird, can you help us be weird? And you know, and we're like, yeah, sure, we can help you be weird. That's easy. Let's talk about it. And it turned into a coaching business kind of by accident. But then I realized that a lot of what I'd been doing through teaching, through the corporate work, through learning, through, you know, John Maxwell, DISC, other things that I brought into my circle, it's like, this is all of the components I need to be doing this coaching stuff. So I started it on the side while I
Yeah,
was in corporate, and then I literally reversed my climb up the corporate ladder. It took me a year to leave my position because I was in a relatively
yeah.
senior position. I'm like, I'm not leaving the company in the lurch. So let me give y'all notice. I'll train my replacement. Then I'll assist them, and then I'll go to part time, and then I'll leave, and did all of that, and then started the business up full time. Been doing that full time since 2017. So that's kind of, and that's, you know, again, I love it because I get to work with people. I get to see the light bulbs. I get to talk to people all over the world. I get to, you know, work from home. When I need to take off, I take off. You know, the things that people say they want about a business is freedom and flexibility and to provide for their families and these things. And it's like, well, I've managed to create a business that at least right now does all of those things for me, you know. And that's kind of the dream that I think a lot of business owners have. So is it perfect? Nah. But is it, you know, what I want? Absolutely.
Man, that is really I wrote it's really cool. That you've got to experience that, and it I probably I probably need to do a better job of talking about that because I was upside down, right?
Mhm.
I knew that struggle. And a lot of that comes out of that just being stuck in survival mode and some of
Yep.
the things that people are. And I wrote down that I was just reading your bios and just kind of getting to know you. But what does it practically look like to build a life around a calling instead of survival?
So one of the things that I like to define first is what calling is, at least to me, because I think a lot of times we get confused. So in English, there's actually two different words and we use them interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. And the words are career and vocation. So career, the root word for career comes from the word for cart. It means something that gets you from point A to point B. It's a mode of transportation. Vocation comes from the same words that comes vocalization, vocal, vocalize, vocalis. It means to be called. It literally means the thing that you're called to. And so, first off, I'm a person of faith. And so I believe that, to be called means there's a caller. And in my language, in my lexicon, that's God. Again, I don't care. Believe whatever you want to believe, call it whatever you want to call it, the universe, design, whatever it is. But I believe that we're kind of hardwired within us are the things that come easy to us. They're the things that bring us joy. Sometimes they're the things that come hard to us too, but they're the things that give us energy and joy. They're the things when you find yourself involved in them, it's like, man, the fire gets lit, the eyes light up. You can tell when somebody's operating in those things. And what's interesting is that calling, I believe, shows and threads through all of the different roles you have. So it shows up in how you're a father. It shows up in how you're a spouse. It shows up in how your money looks. It shows up in your spiritual walk. It shows up in your career. It shows up in all of those things. So to me, calling is bigger than just what you do for a living. Okay. Calling, what you do for a living is part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And so in my case, part of that came about going, well, I want to design a business where I can live out my calling, not just in my work, but also in these other things. So it gives me time to serve on nonprofit boards. That's important to me. That's a value that I have. It gives me time to pick up the phone and call my son and my daughter in the morning, and do that. So I've tried to design not just my career, but all of the different components of my life to give me those threads to have my passion and the things that are important to me, which honestly, the thing that gets me jazzed is helping somebody else have that same moment of clarity and go, dude, this is what I want to do. Okay, great. Now, what do we have to do to get there? What do we have to design? And by the way, that may be a W-2 job. It's not
Yeah.
everyone has to start their own business. There are a lot of people that could start their own business and would be miserable. Don't do that then. It's not that. It's about finding those nuggets that you can weave throughout your life that, man, more days than not, you find contentment and joy as opposed to fear and frustration. You look up and you go, it's not about it being perfect. That's the other thing. Everyone wants everything to be perfect. It's like, dude, if everything was perfect all the time, it you wouldn't enjoy it, believe it or not. You actually would get drained by that. There are mountains and there are valleys, and we need both of them. And that's the other thing I see people doing is they forget that their life is a film strip, not a photograph. And I don't care who you are, and I don't care what your moment is. You could be on the top of the world right now, it's going to change. You
Yeah.
could be in the deepest, darkest valley right now. It's going to change. I don't care where you're at in the journey. The one thing I can promise you is tomorrow's different, or next week, or 3 months from now, or 6 months from it's going to be different. And when you get aware of that, it lets you step back and go, oh, okay. So it's not about making everything perfect. It's not about every moment being perfect. It's about finding the joy and the contentment and the placement in those moments. Well, that's a different thing. That's a different battle. Um, and in a lot of
I,
ways, it's an easier one, and in other ways, it's a harder one. you know?
it's You're spot on with that, man. We walk, we drink from some of the same fountains on our journey. Something I intertwined here recently that I, like you said, was I just kept figuring out, trying to really figuring out the outcome and how you were framing it there. And I have this like amazing story, and I'm kind of I have a friend. He's like, Jeff, you're all over the freaking place. You gotta get it all together. And I've got this amazing story. And what I came up with here recently, just through some really good work, was a lot of folks don't know who they are,
Mhm.
and that was one of my, what I realized was I was, my identity was wrapped up in whatever career, whatever
Mhm.
job, whatever path. That was who I was.
And that's not who
Um,
you are.
and that's absolutely not who I am. So I've kind of built a keynote around that, around helping. And it's just two ways you can approach it. It is, I got a keynote, a workshop that I built around it, where it's an identity reset, to where it's
Mhm.
just kind of that reminder, or it's for people like me who were, when I got hired as a police officer, I was a police officer. And
Yep.
I wasn't anything but that. And that's who I was, and that's who I hung out with, and that's who I was around, because everybody knew the language and we all talked the same way, and all those things. And I had never really got time to figure out who I was. And
Mhm.
I was always everything that I was being called to do. So I worked hard to, man, I didn't realize how much work I was doing to figure that out, Scott.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I put that out there because I want the stuff that the work that you're doing, man, is, you're one of those folks where I get to meet you now, and I feel like I'm a well-oiled machine, and we can have this conversation, and we can laugh about, hey, let's talk about where I was and where you was, and here we
Yeah.
are as coaches and doing
It's
our
become
things.
part of the journey as opposed to where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah, but man, there's millions, thousands upon thousands and millions of people that need to hear Scott, and
My goal is just this. It's if I can help somebody go on that journey a little quicker or a little smoother or
yeah,
maybe not have some of the bumps I had, okay, good. Because they're still going to have to go through a journey. It's nobody. You don't do this and it's just like, oh, that was easy.
that's
No, no,
right.
no, 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 no. It's hard work, but
Yeah.
it, but if I can help you do it a little quicker, a little easier than I had to do it, okay, then I've done my job. I've done my job.
One of my inspirations behind this too was, when I was day to day at my Fit Body Boot Camp. I owned a gym, and I would have people come in, and they would, they might be late for class, and then late for class turned into, missing, a couple weeks, and which then ultimately come in for a little bit, then ultimately to a membership drop. And one of the commonalities was that people would let their work consume them.
Hmm.
And they're like, yeah, my boss will let me off to get here. Yeah, he's been holding me over, sitting down. And I go, you're telling me your boss won't let you do self care, won't let you come in and take care of you, expect you. He's like, oh yeah, it's high demand. I go, that's not who you are. And that's, I had shared that with my wife, and I was like, used to drive me nuts. And I was trying to, I don't know if you're guilty of this as a coach. We're always trying to figure out
What's
that
the
one
switch? Yeah.
switch, and just like, so that's a little bit of this was born to help those folks, not the folks that are just out here kind of, but people that seemingly think they have it together, but they're letting the demands of everyone else steal them away from who they really are.
Right. Well, and that's one of the earlier I mentioned. One of the that I had two phrases that I don't let people do, and one of them was I have to. The other
Yeah,
is I don't have time for that. And honestly, that's those group people. Because here's the thing: all I tell them to do, and you can try this too. Change the language again. Go back to the language. The language we use is so powerful. You're no longer allowed to say I don't have time to that. Instead, you have to say that's not a priority for me.
yeah,
And here's the interesting thing: you'll make a different set of decisions, but what's else is the people around you sometimes will hold you to a different set of decisions. Because picture it for a minute, and you're sitting there in the cubicle, you're working away, you're doing your thing. Your coworker comes by and they're like, hey Jeff, I thought you had your daughter's soccer game tonight. You were going to go to your daughter's soccer game. And you're like, oh man, I just don't have time to make it to the game. Your coworker is going to pat you on the back and go, poor Jeff. Oh, you're working so hard, poor Jeff. I understand we're all busy. It's high demand, blah, 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 blah. Your work coworker is going to buy into your fallacy, and kind of support you and commensurate with you. If on the other hand, you look at your coworker and you go, oh, it's just really not a priority to make it to my daughter's soccer game.
Yeah.
Your coworker's going to grab you by the ear and drag you out to the parking lot and throw you in your car and be like, dude, go to your soccer game. Of course it's a priority to go to your daughter's soccer game. And you'll make a different decision too, because if you say that out loud, you're going to feel like a jerk.
Yeah.
But when we say we don't have time, everyone pats us on the back and goes, oh, I'm so busy. Busy has become a badge of honor. And it's like, busy isn't a badge of honor. Busy just means doing a bunch of stuff. It doesn't mean you're doing anything that's good or right. It just means you're doing it. Well, wait a minute. Instead, I don't want to be busy. I want to be productive. I want to do things that matter. That's the goal.
That Scott, that is probably a folks rewind that and listen to the last 2 to 3 minutes of what he's explaining to you. And when you get ready, when you go to make this decision on choices, like we were talking about earlier, but when you're going to make this choice on whether you're not going to go to that game or you're not going to go to the gym or whatever that might be, is add that priority word in there and see what that sounds like to you. And I can tell you, because I was sitting here running through some scenarios in my head, and I'm not on that side of it in a lot of these situations, but that stings.
Oh yeah,
It'll absolutely sting you if you approach it from that, and it'll change your mindset.
It makes you reorder things, which is the whole point, because again, why were the people coming to the gym that weren't coming to the gym? Coming to the gym was important to them.
Yeah.
It was a priority. But what were they doing? They were allowing something else to set their priority instead of them setting it. And no, you can't do that.
Scott, will you tell us, walk us through who your ideal client is, who you're, for the folks that are listening, someone, and you know someone who you're like, you know what, I know someone would be a good fit for Scott. Walk us through your ideal client, and then how would you like for them to get in touch with you to keep the conversation going with you?
Absolutely. So, and thank you for that opportunity. My ideal client is usually a person of faith, not always, but they at least got to be faith friendly. And they look up and those two things that we just talked about, they find themselves saying, there's stuff I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't have enough time or I don't have enough money. More often than not, those are the triggers. When they find themselves saying that, they're probably somebody that's worth me having a conversation with. A lot of them are couples, a lot of them are small business owners, a lot of different people, a lot of different countries, different experiences. But it's when they have that block between, I know I'm supposed to be doing this, and what's holding me back is time and money. It's worth an introduction. And I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners, and it has some free resources, but it also has a way folks can get in touch with me. And you can find that over at inspiredstewardship.com and then just /Robertson. So just like the name of the show. And basically, they're, like I said, free resources, a little bit about I've had a book, Inspired Living. I've got some other information like that. And the book, honestly, is a good place for somebody that maybe wants to start, but doesn't necessarily want to meet with somebody yet, but wants to start working on it. The book is a really good kind of primer. I tried to do kind of like you were talking about earlier, of take it down and go, okay, here's the complex stuff, but here's some simple stuff you can do to get started. And you can find all of that over at inspiredstewardship.com /Robertson.
Man, take advantage of that, folks. I will. I'll always do a blog post for my guests, and we're going to backlink to that. So if you get lost, it'll be in the show notes. It's going to be in all the areas that we normally do, and then I'm going to I'll do a blog post referencing that link. Thank you for doing that. You're absolutely. I've done a lot of podcasts, and I believe that the effort we put into helping lift each other's brands is important. And you're one of the few people that takes advantage of that, because I try to absolutely help amplify every voice that I can that comes on here. So I appreciate you giving us that opportunity.
Absolutely.
I hope you're back on here at some point in time, man. It's easy conversation for us. I think we, like I said, we've canoed in the same waters. So
Well, and
it's
that's the
that,
thing is there's got to be more people out there saying the same message.
yeah,
I think, and I get a feeling you're the same person as me. It's not about I've got to be the only one doing it. It's about, dude,
yeah,
there's a lot of people out there that need a lot of help, and if I can make their journey a little easier, if you can make their journey a little easier, whoever it is, dude, go listen to that person,
yeah.
because you don't have to have nearly as many bumps and bruises as Jeff and I have to learn the lesson.
Yeah, you touched on it. That's folks. One of my passions is helping people navigate with more certainty and on an easier, less rocky path than what I put myself through. And people was trying to
Absolutely.
help me along the way, too. But just that voice sometimes is the one you're looking for that resonates
so
with you.
so wait, you're stubborn too,
No,
huh?
if you're gonna be dumb, you got to be tough, is what I was told at one point in time. Man, thank you for being on, Scott. I appreciate you, folks. Make sure you connect with this guy. He's on a mission, and let's do what we can to help support his mission. Sharing this episode with some folks that that's looking for Scott or needs Scott in their life. Thank you for being on today, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.